from WCIA 3 Plus. With your host, Stu Ellis. This is From the Farm.
And we welcome you to our program today. My name is Stu Ellis. With us is a longtime friend who I rely upon for knowing what's happening as far as farm policy. Jonathan Coppess is part of the College of Aces. He's policy specialist on the Farm Doc team, and everything that deals with farm policy really goes through and comes from Jonathan. And he's a veteran of Washington, and has a lot of background in that venue. And so we know that when we talk to him and listen to what he has to say, there's certainly it's well rooted in what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. And Jonathan, I think we could start out by saying the topic today is Farm Bill. And we've been working on a Farm Bill or at least renewing the Farm Bill for a number of years. It expired several years ago. It's been renewed a couple of times. We thought we were going to have possibly a new one, but for the benefit of the audience, where are we in that process right now?
Yeah, well, good morning, Stu, and I do feel bad that if you're relying on me, we're probably both lost and looking for answers here. So I will apologize for that up front, because there's a whole lot of uncertainty, a whole lot of kind of lack of the usual, way things are done. So as you mentioned, the Farm Bill, the last time Congress reauthorized all those programs in the Farm Bill was in 2018. It was scheduled they were scheduled to reauthorize again in 2023. Here we sit in 2026, and it's still unfinished business is kind of how I've been trying to frame it. And a big part of the challenge that Congress is having is that last year in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OB3, which was largely about tax cuts and things like that, but tucked into that were changes to traditional Farm Bill programs, particularly the farm support programs, the payment programs, some changes to crop insurance. And then the big ticket issue was about a $200 billion estimated reduction in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, used to be called food stamps or SNAP. And in the sort of political operation of the Farm Bill, right? One of the reasons we have this big, massive legislative effort is that it builds a coalition across rural interest, farm interest, urban interest, members of Congress. And it actually was a very powerful coalition politically that could get a lot of votes in Congress on the House and Senate floor. But when Congress took that step last year in the budget reconciliation bill, they broke apart that coalition. They violated what we called the cardinal rule of Farm Bill politics. You never cut food assistance to boost payments to farmers. And they nearly doubled, if not more, the expected payments to farmers while cutting over $200 billion from food assistance. And so that really broke up the political coalition, the sort of the operational aspects of it. It reauthorized the farm programs, reauthorized conservation programs through 2031, and then it left everything else. Remember, Farm Bill is like 12 titles, it's thousands of pages of legislative text, it's hundreds and hundreds of programs. So everything that didn't get taken up in that reconciliation bill was left behind. And so now Congress is trying to pick up finish that unfinished business and get the rest of it through. And of course, because they broke the cardinal rule last year, because these major programs like farm support and SNAP were taken up in the reconciliation bill, the politics is even tougher to move legislation now. And so that's what we're seeing. It's kind of stuck. The House struggled, but eventually passed it. And the Senate Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee Chairman John Bozeman from Arkansas released legislative text the other week and is talking about trying to mark it up, but the path is very unclear. And that would all be, challenging in a normal year. But as I think probably everybody knows, we're in a pretty heated midterm election year. And, the news, the world doesn't sit by and wait for Congress to act. It has been a pretty hectic news cycle. You see the headlines this morning where whatever ceasefire may have been in place with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz situation has blown open again. Of course, we had the death of Senator Lindsey Graham that complicates vote counting and so forth. So there's a lot of challenges, and we're in a very short legislative calendar. Congress will only be in probably another week or two in July before the August recess. And then there'll be some time in September, and then they're back out on the campaign trail for the midterm. So it's really difficult to move anything right now. But certainly when you have all these swirling controversies after the reconciliation bill last year, it's tough to finish this unfinished farm bill.
Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley said this last week that he doesn't see Farm Bill doing anything until after the midterm elections, and I'm assuming that you would probably agree with that.
Yeah, again, maybe the committee can report something out. That would be an important step. The Senate Ag Committee, unfortunately, has not acted on legislation in a formal way this entire time. What was put in the reconciliation bill was never considered by the committee. It wasn't marked up, we call it. They didn't produce legislation and then debate it and amend it at the committee level. So the Senate Ag Committee has not done its, sort of first steps in this process this entire time. So if they can mark up legislation and get it out of the committee, that would be a really big step. And then I think, everybody's eyes turn to what could be a potential very busy lame duck session after the midterm elections.
So it kind of fell apart in the last Congress when there was some action in the House, but then the senator from Michigan who was chairing the House or the Senate Ag Committee really never got anything onto the table that could be discussed, and a lot of people were pointing at that as one of the downfalls of not making progress.
Yeah, if we step back a bit, Chairwoman Stabenow, previous Chairwoman Stabenow from Michigan, she did not mark up legislation, and most of the news stories indicated that the real problem was that they couldn't reach agreement. Her and then ranking member, now Chairman Bozeman, couldn't reach an agreement on how to deal with these big ticket items. And in particular, there's this request to increase farm subsidy payments or farm program payments. And in the way the Farm Bill works, any of those increases, they get the Congressional Budget Office will estimate the cost of those changes, and they do it over 10 years. And so these numbers get to be really big in a 10-year what we call budget score. And so part of the challenge is there's this request to boost the farm program payments, and there was no way to pay for it because the other budget rule is for the committee is if you're going to increase spending on one thing, you got to cut something else. And that, of course, gets really difficult. And so they weren't able to reach an agreement. The House Ag Committee produced legislation that did that in part by cutting SNAP, and they couldn't get time on the floor. And so it is one of these, challenges we're seeing in Congress. It's sort of this really volatile mixture, very, very problematic mixture of the budget rules that Congress put in place, which I just heard on the news this morning were now, some of the largest deficits we've ever run. So it's not as if these budget rules are working. But what they do is make it extraordinarily hard to move legislation or really do much because we force this kind of strange accounting process over 10 years and offsetting any increased estimated costs and so forth, which if you think about the whole way Congress works, it requires coalitions, right? You got to count votes. You got to bring people together to vote on things, particularly 60 votes in the Senate. And so that means these budget rules really break apart that coalition or that ability to hold together a coalition. And then this is also coinciding with this just intense polarization that we're seeing in Congress, but in our politics nationally. And so that volatile mixture makes it really hard to get things done.
The Farm Bill is our topic today, and our guest is Jonathan Coppess, who is a policy specialist for the Farm Doc team at the University of Illinois. And we'll be back with more in our discussion right after this. Stay with us. Welcome back to you. We're talking about the Farm Bill, or or whatever we want to call it, I guess, the remnants of the Farm Bill that need to be passed in Congress. Our guest is Jonathan Coppess, and Jonathan is a policy specialist for the Farm Doc team at the University of Illinois. And we mentioned just in passing a few moments ago SNAP, and that's the supplemental nutrition and program that 40 million people rely upon. And the House cut $187 billion out of that 10-year budget for SNAP. And we've got a problem in the Senate of what's going to happen to it, because there's a lot of folks who say we can't cut that much. They want states to pick up the shortfall, and states are saying, whoa, we don't have that kind of money. What's going to happen in your best guess?
So this appears to be, and you're absolutely right, this appears to be one of the major sticking points. And as you noted, there's about this, the cut in the reconciliation bill last year. And it's a little complicated and a lot messy. But the basics are, look, to your point, right? The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program is a huge program. It helps over 40 million Americans every month, on average, put food on the table. So anything you do to help 40 million people in this country is going to cost a lot of money. And then you magnify that over 10 years and so forth. So it gets this, when all we do is think about budgets and numbers and baselines, right? It gets this outsized sort of political attention that attacks it for spending. And oftentimes we conveniently ignore how many people are unfortunately in a position where they need help putting food on the table. And that's what this program does. Now, bottom line, it's helping people put food on the table, which is important to farmers as well as everybody else. What I think is one of the big mistakes and one of the real just unfortunate moves in that reconciliation bill last year was they were looking for ways to cut the program. And there aren't easy ways to cut the program because individuals don't get a lot of money. So it's not like you can cut benefits that much. So really the only way you can cut spending on SNAP is you have to force people off the program. So they came up with something that I guess is kind of clever. And they used an error rate calculation for states to basically force states to pick up some portion of the cost of the benefits for people in the state who need help with food purchases, based on this strange sort of arbitrary calculation around error rates. And so the news story this morning was talking about Illinois is at like 14%. And remember, an error rate isn't that somebody shouldn't get money. You can have an overpayment, you can have an underpayment, you can have some paperwork problem in the process that creates an error rate. And I think that's the main issue, right? They didn't really want to cut the program in a way they would have to live with it. So they force the issue out, and they basically make what I would call our paperwork or bureaucratic hurdles and problems and requirements. And by making it really hard for people to get the assistance. So you might have to go to 3 offices, and you might be a single mother dealing with kids and other issues, and you've got to go, office after office, time after time, and eventually you give up and you just don't enroll in the program. So when the Congressional Budget Office projected $200 billion or $187 billion in cuts, it was a projection that, millions of people simply would give up or not be able to get assistance. Well, now that reality is haunting the Senate Ag Committee in particular, because states don't have the money to cover these costs. They'd have to hire a lot of people to do a lot of this bureaucratic work. That's not realistic. And so we're in this bind. And then if the Senate Ag Committee, in order to pass the unfinished farm bill, wants votes across the aisle on this, they need to come up with something, and that's going to cost money. And here we are again in this budget trap, because in order to even delay this by a couple years, it's going to cost tens of billions of dollars, which have to be cut from something else to offset those costs under budget rules. So they put themselves in this bind. And we can we can be cynical. We can talk about some of the politics and some of the other stuff about it. What I find really unfortunate, and again, this is too often, I think, just forgotten or left out of the conversation, is that we're talking about real people, our neighbors and communities who are struggling to eat, who are struggling to buy food, are the ones hurt by this. And they're left in this sort of state of like, whether they're going to get the assistance or not. And so Congress created this mess, and Congress needs to find a way out of it. But again, it finds itself in these trapped by these budget rules. And that's what got us into this with reconciliation last year with the offsets. It's one of the reasons why we've been delayed for so long. And it's the big hurdle now. And so you mentioned Senator Grassley's comment about lame duck. One of the things that you're able to do often in a lame duck is bypass a lot of this because you just waive the rules because you're post-election and you're trying to get a lot done. So maybe that is the outlet here. Maybe that is the path forward. But I do think what we're seeing is how much these things expose the problems we have with legislating. And look, we're a system of self-government. The way we govern ourselves is first and foremost through Congress. And so to have this level of problem, this level of dysfunction in our first branch of government should concern us all. And it should be a wake-up call that we need to make some changes in how we're operating there, because this should not be the situation. But anyway, I get into my frustration with Congress mode, and I think you have more specific questions, so I'll stop there, Stu.
Oh, we can tell you have explained a lot on that frustration, and I think people really don't understand all the complications when Congress doesn't act or just can't figure out what to do. And as you said, it has to be 60 votes to solve a problem. I'm not sure whether changing that to a simple majority is going to be beneficial or not, but nevertheless, it's a tough nut to crack. And I feel sorry for all of those that have to make a decision because the decision is going to be tough. It may mean the end of their term, whether the public may reelect them to Congress, but or not. But that's not going to solve the problem. It's just going to be how do we get out of a mess that just can't. There's no exit door for. We're talking with Jonathan Coppess about the Farm Bill, and we've got fortunately more time with him. We'll be back in a couple of minutes to talk more about how to solve some of those problems. Stay with us. We welcome you back to our program talking about the Farm Bill and what's in it, what's not, and what happened to the Farm Bill. Jonathan Coppess is our guest. He's on the College of ACES staff as the policy specialist for Farm Doc, and there's a couple of issues that a lot of farmers are quite interested in, hoping that they will be resolved in the Farm Bill, which has not been resolved itself. One of those is E15. The other is Proposition 12 that'll make the pork producers happy if that can be resolved. Let's talk first about ethanol. Do you see E15 as being part of a farm legislative package this in this go-around, whenever it gets gone around?
Well, I feel bad that this is from the farm, and I've been talking so much about Congress, but this is another one of those Congress issues because the E15 question, which is under the Renewable Fuel Standard and is all under the Clean Air Act, which actually is not within the jurisdiction of the Senate Ag Committee. It would have to be under the Environment and Public Works Committee. But I would imagine that if they were to get floor time or do something in a lame duck, that would be part of an overall agreement. But it's not something we would see from the Senate Ag Committee because it's not their jurisdiction to deal with it. And the House moved a version so that, again, this is probably where we're seeing these comments from somebody like Senator Grassley, who's done this a couple years and knows a lot of these things, that, this begins to look like it stacks up for lame duck and you roll a bunch of these together. But I don't want to I don't want to be over optimistic about that because we just don't know. We don't know what kind of lame duck session there'll be and what the appetite is post-election for any of these issues. And, you know, the E15 one, I think it seems like it's kind of a no-brainer. I don't know all that's holding it up. I know there was some controversy in the House with the way they designed some of those pieces around E15 that may have hurt the biodiesel soybean industry. You know, the oil industry always wants to have its say on these sort of things, and they've of course been, you know, reluctant to see much expansion in biofuels because they see it as a competition in the fuel market for them. So there's, you know, with any of these issues, it's not a clear-cut, easy path. But I would think that if Congress is going to roll something through in a lame duck, that E15 would be a part of it. I just want to make sure that you're not going to see that it'll probably be talked about at the markup, but it's outside the jurisdiction of the Ag Committee. So that's going to be a challenge to do in the Senate Ag Committee.
What about the pork issue of where the state of California passed some legislation that really restricts how pork producers can produce pork, and it's called Proposition 12, and the pork industry wants Congress to make it so one state cannot dictate pork production rules to every other state. Is that something that the Ag Committee could do, and is that something you see it addressing?
So this is another one of these just difficult and complex issues. So I want to step back to your point a little bit. So the voters of California in a voter referendum passed, I think by a pretty large margin, this Proposition 12. And what it says is you cannot sell pork products in the state of California to California voter or consumers if they're raised in these crates, if the crates are too small and do not allow the animal enough space to move, right? So it doesn't necessarily dictate, and it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld it because it's not actually, it's saying any pork sold, so it's not sort of a discriminatory practice. But of course, California doesn't produce pork, so it's, you know, it's produced in states like Iowa and Illinois. And that's been a challenge because that's going to require then the pork producers to have to make some changes to their operation. Many of them, or some of them have, and so forth. So it's controversial to begin with. Now we go to the Congress question. So remember, we got to get through the Senate, through the House. And what it would require is basically the federal government telling the voters of the state of California that they can't have this proposition. They can't have this requirement on pork sold in their state, even though they voted for it. So you can imagine in our federal system that raises a lot of concern and controversy, even if we set aside that it's, you know, there's a lot of questions about, you know, the proposition itself and, you know, dictating how animals are raised and all of that. You set all that aside, it is just controversial for Congress to tell the voters of a state that they can't, you know, they can't continue the law they passed in their state. That just raises, you know, federalism concerns. It raises this sort of, you know, these issues around having the federal government step in and basically veto, if you will, what the voters in California passed. So I can see that as one of those things that if you're trying to move legislation in a difficult environment, you don't need to add more controversy to it. And that leaves it, you know, very much up in the air. It's not in Chairman Bozeman's draft text. It was in the House bill. And so it's kind of a wait and see. You got two senators from California, like you have two senators from Illinois and every other state, and they're going to have a big say on that. And if you want to move legislation, you want to move legislation in the Senate, you don't want to give two senators you know, a reason to really be in opposition to it. And I can imagine that they don't want to have to go back to the voters of California and tell them, you know, that they allowed this to be overridden in Congress, contrary to what the voters of California said. So it is a real kind of tricky issue. on all aspects of it. So I don't know if we're going to see that get put in the bill, or whether that's in something in the lame duck session.
Well, I appreciate that insight, and what we've done here today is probably discouraged a lot of people who wanted to run for Congress from ever deciding that again. It's one of the most complicated things. Jonathan, we really appreciate your insight and experience in Washington and dealing with Farm Bill legislation, and we look forward to talking to you again sometime soon. Take care, my friend.
It's great to see you, Stu. Thanks.
And we appreciate all of you joining us today, and join us again next time you have the opportunity.
From WCIA 3 Plus, with your host, Stu Ellis. This is From the Farm.
You to our program today, and we're going to go off the farm into an agribusiness vein. And it's something that a lot of people may have heard about what's going on. We want to show you how it's all put together, and you can figure out where your future might be in this, because it's got a lot of opportunity for young people, older people, just anybody, because it's a tremendous new economic opportunity that's come to Central Illinois. Our guest today is Nicole Bateman, and Nicole has one of the things that she does, she is the technical strategy director for the IFAB lab, the Illinois Fermentation and Agriculture Bioprocessing Lab at the University of Illinois. That's one title. The next title, she's in her office in Decatur because she is the president of the Decatur Economic Development Commission, and she is the newly elected vice president of the Illinois Economic Development Association. And also she's a mom. And we may talk about all four of these things in our program today, because this is it shows how people can get very, very busy and do a lot of great things. And that's kind of, Nicole Bateman is in the middle of all of this. So tell me how you put all of these things together for the benefit of Central Illinois.
Well, we try to do it very carefully and very strategically. Thank you for the warm welcome this morning, Stu. There's a lot of opportunity that we have here in Central Illinois, and being able to leverage not only our assets that we have, but really collaborate with other communities to bring everything together is really important for advancing our economies. For a really long time, economic development, which is my initial and primary role in the Decatur and Macon County region, a lot of time economic development was very much a, don't look at my homework situation across not only Central Illinois, but generally across the United States and the world. Everybody, is very competitive. We felt like projects we'd be competing for projects against each other. But really, after a number of years, we realized that's not the case. We know when companies are looking to locate in a region, they truly are looking at the entire region. They may be looking east of the Mississippi and west of Pennsylvania. They're not necessarily looking at, let's say, Champaign versus Decatur. For the types of work that we do. And so we knew that for a long time, we had this great ag tech corridor that we could be promoting. And we're generally promoting between, let's say, Champaign and Decatur, Illinois, but it didn't really have legs until the tech hub opportunity came about from the Federal Economic Development Administration. That really forced us to take a look at what one specific technology do we have in this region that we felt we could be the global leader in within the decade. And so because we had already had a lot of these relationships built between not only the Economic Development Corporation in Champaign County and Decatur and Macon County, but also our friends in Piatt County, our friends at the University of Illinois, our agribusiness giants like ADM and Primient, Clarkson Grain, Thew Arnott, right? Our community colleges and our university system. We had had all of it pieced together already with these relationships. What we needed to do was just really formalize and figure out what we needed to become the global leader. And at the end of the day, we needed tanks and a workforce and some infrastructure. And the Tech Hubs program allowed us to apply competitively, in which we were awarded $51 million then to deploy into Central Illinois to expand our precision fermentation capabilities. That's kind of the long and short of how we got here today.
Well, that's an abbreviation because there's a lot more of work that you had done, but tanks and a workforce. And when we say tanks, we don't mean the type that are on a battlefield, but big silver ones that store things. And that's where the fermentation thing comes involved. And if people drive by ADM or Primient, they see a lot of tanks there, and all of a sudden they realize that they're full of very valuable products, and it takes a workforce to assemble all of that. And then it had to start at the university in a small lab where some genius people could come up with a formula or a recipe and create things, and then all of a sudden it gets expanded into something big, and that means big bucks coming into the area. And I guess that's how it all works.
It is very simply put. It's creating an ecosystem where companies can scale their products. And so what we were finding in the United States was that there was a gap in the ecosystem where companies could start at a location like the Integrated Bioprocessing Research Lab, IBRL for short, on the University of Illinois campus. And once they perfected their technology there, they were ready to scale to the next size tank, if you will, on the fermentation tanks. There really wasn't anywhere in America that had that infrastructure. And so we were sending them to Europe or India, sometimes China. But once those companies leave, it's very difficult for them to come back if they come back. And so as an economic developer, knowing that these companies were starting in our area and we didn't have anywhere for them to go next was crazy to me. And so, again, this is where we recognize the opportunity to keep companies here, but we needed to build the fermentation tank. So if we think about it this way. If you are making a batch of cookies in your kitchen, you have all the equipment that you would need to make cookies for your family. Maybe even for your kids' school, right? So like as a mother, you're always thinking about things that you're going to make. So you would have the equipment to do that. Now, if you're going to scale up and you're going to make cookies for the entire school district, you would need a different size kitchen. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the recipe that you have is going to work at that scale. And so then I would need to go out and buy all the equipment for a commercial kitchen and really hope that my recipe is going to work at that level. Okay, so think about that in the fermentation space as well. It's the same idea. Companies, to buy fermentation tanks and equipment and all the downstream processing pieces that go with that is incredibly expensive, and companies just don't have the money to do that. And so again, while the IBRL lab on U of I's campus provided this really incredible space for them to test that out, but what we needed to do to scale those companies here in America and specifically in Central Illinois was build the next size tanks, right? So get them the next size kitchen that they can rent for a certain amount of time to test out their product to make sure it scales appropriately, and then keep going from there. So when we look at it from a stepwise process, there's a couple of opportunities that we're creating here in Central Illinois. So we have not only at IBRL, but if you take it one notch down, we have the University of Illinois Research Park. And when I say down, I don't mean in quality, I mean in the size and scale of which companies can start testing. So they are a major factor in what we have to offer in the IFAB Tech Hub as well. Their abilities at Research Park and the abilities not only to collaborate with other companies within the park, but then to leverage the University of Illinois' knowledge and expertise in this area too at that scale. So the idea would be that companies could start there at Research Park, then they could scale and use the assets at the Integrated Bioprocessing Research Lab and Champaign-Urbana on U of I's campus. Then they could scale to the next step, which could be at Primient here in Decatur, Illinois, where they will have capacities upwards of 10,000 to 13,000 liters. At that point, companies are able to really start putting their product out on the market and start making some money. But if they need to scale even greater, then they can additionally go to ADM, which is also building tanks for other companies to utilize, up to about an 80,000 liter capacity. And so then once they're rocking and rolling at that stage, then at that point, they're really looking probably to build their own facilities. And again, thinking about economic development, once they have scaled to that level, they will have their feedstock contracts with either one of those companies in the Decatur area. They will have their relationships built with our IFAB Tech Hub leadership team, including Carly McKay and Champaign and myself here in Decatur and others. There's really no reason for them to go anywhere else. So then when they look at building their own factories, the intent likely will be to build them here in this region, which creates additional jobs. And so that's where we talk about the need for the workforce as well. If we capture what we think we can capture out of this $200 to $300 billion market, kind of depends on who you ask, but it really is billion with a B. If we capture what we think we can capture here, we're looking at anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 new employees over the next 10 to 15 years that are going to be needed here in the Central Illinois region. That's very significant.
That's right.
So, we're excited about that opportunity.
And there's every reason to be excited. And you opened lots of doors there, and we're going to go through some of those doors when we come back. We'll be back. Don't go away. We've got a lot more exciting news to tell you. Stand by. We welcome you back to our program today, which is focused on, agricultural processing. Taking things all the way from the corn and bean stage to industrial and food products. Our guest is Nicole Bateman, who is really a technical leader for the IFAB lab at the University of Illinois, but also head of economic development in Decatur. And Nicole, you have really mentioned some extraordinary things of what the economic opportunities are for this area. But what sort of products are we talking about? If we take a soybean or a kernel of corn, what sort of things can we come up with that would be going through this processing?
So think about products that are made with petroleum products, right? So you think about basically things that we have in our everyday life. So we expect that 30% of the chemical demand is going to be through a clean, what consumers consider clean products or plant-based products over the next several decades. And so where that starts to apply, and specifically to our precision fermentation capabilities in this area, we're really looking at three different categories. So specialty chemicals, food, and chemical precursors. You're probably familiar with vaccines, insulin, pharmaceuticals. That also uses this fermentation technology. That's how insulin is made. But we're not going to play in that space. We're really sticking to that ag-based area. So again, kind of turning those kernels of corn or soybeans into those three product categories. So diving in on that a little bit more. So when we talk about specialty chemicals, think of things like enzymes, animal-based and plant-based proteins and lipids. Lipids would be like collagen, silk, palm oil. We're talking about pigments and fragrances. So a lot of makeup, if you will, is made with petroleum products. And I think, once again, kind of going back to the mother and me, thinking about the lotions and the things that we're putting on our children, wouldn't we rather have those be more natural based, more plant based?
Sure.
And so
yeah.
Taking those chemicals out of those types of products and those specialty chemicals. When we look at food products in that category, we're looking at dairy, meat, and egg proteins, fats, additives, dyes and flavors, that is a really, really big one right now. We think about the MAHA movement, right? So thinking about taking those chemical dyes out of our food systems, those can easily be replaced through fermentation. So you ferment products like let's say like beets, right? So that's one way to get different coloring. There's all different ways that you can get these kind of natural colors that can be a replacement for those chemical colors that we have in our food systems. And then if we look at the third category that we're really focused on, chemical precursors, then we're talking about resins, monomers, fertilizers and pesticides, lubricants, fibers, and textiles. So again, the array of application that precision fermentation has as a technology is very vast. And I think we're really just starting to scratch the surface of what this it's actually a very old technology. We think about fermentation, or I should say the process of it, fermentation. It's the same process in how you would make beer and mead and wine. We've been doing it forever. Feta cheese, right? So we've been using fermentation for much of humankind has been in existence. But where it changes now is that biology and science has gotten so good that we can be so precise about the formulation that we're coming out then with these very precise specialty chemicals and food and precursors on the end that we can use to replace those petroleum-based products.
I'm sure the mother in you would rather put soybean oil-based oil on your baby's bottom than a petroleum-based oil on your baby's bottom.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're starting to see a lot of the demand. I mean, people are paying more attention to our food systems, are paying more attention to what's in the products that they're either consuming or putting on their skin or breathing every day. I think the more knowledgeable we become, the more maybe alarmed we become with what we're consuming and what's in our systems. And so I think there really is this turn towards wanting to become healthier. And what I love about this, having grown up on a farm myself, is that this is going to open new markets for our American farmers. It plays a really critical role in in our supply chain, shoring up our national defense as well, becoming less dependent on foreign countries for some of these materials that we need for our critical goods. And it allows us to, developing this tech hub and, building these tanks that I talked about before, position Central Illinois in such a way that we will be the ones that can make all of these products to help make America more resilient.
So we might see the Primient and ADM footprints in Decatur spread out a little further with some adjacent companies that have some of these tanks. And instead of 1,000 trucks of corn and beans coming into Decatur every day, there may be 1,500 trucks of corn and beans, because they're just going through a lot more products, turning them into these precision-made products that are going to be more choices on the shelf in the drugstore and in the grocery store.
Yeah, it'll certainly do that. And what it also provides is a little bit of I would say like a safety net, if you will. So maybe when an area, if we're okay, now's a really good example, right? If we're unable to export as many goods as we had in the past because of tariffs or
Sure.
because of, global challenges, we are still making products here that we're consuming ourselves in America, right? So it provides this market, if you will, this flexibility. I think that also, again, what's happening in the Middle East, and when you look at fermentation, you look at how we've used it for decades to make ethanol. Right, same process. We're very familiar with ethanol. I think that states a great case for why we need to continue to invest in this type of technology here in the United States, so that we continue to make our country more resilient. And certainly, those are the types of additionally, in addition to makeups and lotions and things like that, and food. when we think about the materials that we need as a country, from the defense standpoint and stability standpoint, this is certainly a technology that will help us get there as well.
I think a few farmers' ears perked up on that last point that you made. We're talking with Nicole Bateman of the Decatur Economic Development Commission and the IBRL, the Fermentation Lab here at the University of Illinois. We'll be back with more conversation in just a moment. Don't go away. We welcome you back to our program. We're talking about more demand for corn and beans. We're talking about jobs for people, all focused right here in Central Illinois. Nicole Bateman is with us, and she's with kind of links the University of Illinois to corn and bean processing at the at Decatur, because she's with the Economic Development Commission. And in addition to corn and beans coming in and better economy for the farms, there's a lot of jobs, I have a feeling, because you've mentioned dozens and dozens of different things that are going to be made, and I have a feeling the companies are going to be looking for folks to help do that. So this is a jobs thing too, I guess.
It sure is. We expect it to be a major economic and jobs driver here in the Central Illinois region over the next, starting now, actually. We've had a couple of new job postings for the fermentation type roles at ADM and Primient, IBRL, University of Illinois Research Park, and other companies as well that will all be participating in this space. But really, when we look at biomanufacturing, which is what the Central Illinois region, specifically Decatur, excels at, how do we continue to grow that with using, the precision fermentation and the IFAB Tech Hub as a driver for that? And so what we anticipate, if you will, is by 2040, 3,000 to 6,000, I think I said 5 earlier, but I'm looking at my notes here, 3,000 to 6,000 new jobs in the biomanufacturing economy in Central Illinois due to the attraction of new companies and the expansion of existing companies that will locate here because of our precision fermentation capabilities and those assets, those tanks that we're building. Now, when we think about that in terms of manufacturing, biomanufacturing, manufacturing, we know that for every one job that is created, you have what we call a multiplier effect. So in manufacturing, if we're expecting 3,000 to 6,000 direct jobs because of precision fermentation, the spinoff from that will result in about anywhere from 15,000 to 30,000 additional jobs. Because if you think about, you've got the accountants, you've got the truck drivers, you've got the railroad operators, you have the packaging folks. I mean, you name it, right? You think about manufacturing, there are a whole lot of people that are involved in that process, and that's what we're expecting. And so for us to get started on building and continuing to support the existing workforce that we have, but really looking at what are those emerging careers that we expect to come as a result of these IFAB efforts. We worked with our partners at the Illinois Manufacturing Excellence Center, IMEC, to identify the top 10 emerging careers in biomanufacturing. And you can find those on our website. It's ifabtechhub.org, and there's a career section. And these careers span everything from agricultural food scientist to regulatory affairs specialist to a biostatistician, precision ag and digital ag specialist, bioprocessing equipment maintenance technician. That's a huge one. If you've ever been in any of these facilities, or like we said, just drive by them, there is a huge demand for technicians in this area as well. So those are just a few of the 10 that we've identified. The beauty of what I think we've built out is not that we're just telling you what these careers are, but each of these is laid out on these tiles on the website. When you click on the tile, you can jump in and do a deeper dive. So you'll learn everything about the industry outlook for that career and competencies specific to that career. Where I think this is especially helpful is for our educators. So I firmly believe that our school districts and our school systems play a very, very, very significant role in preparing students for the workforce. Now, that might be for the workforce immediately after high school upon graduation. That may be preparing them for the workforce after they continue their education through community college or university systems, or going into trades and labors or getting more technical certifications. Whatever that may be, the more that we as a community and as an industry can help our teachers and our educational institutions learn about the careers that are available, but more specifically about the competencies that those students are going to need to excel in those careers, I think that's where we're really going to set ourselves apart here in Central Illinois when we talk about developing a workforce. So again, there's also on-the-job training guides for employers, and those competency matrices. I would really encourage, if anyone's listening today, that may be in those fields where, even thinking about 4-H and FFA programs, where you're able to really connect with the youth in our area, have them explore this website. As we are, we've kind of built out the website in a way where that's easy to see the information and digest it. But now the work is going in with our community colleges and our workforce investment partners, trades and labor, and the university systems to build out what that pathway looks like so that students then will be able to access that programming. If we look at our systems now, there may not be something that says bioprocessing technician, though much of the programming that's taking place actually applies to that. So we're working right now, as I speak, with our different educational institutions to start really packaging that, but also we are fortunate to be receiving some funding from the state of Illinois to bring in fermentation equipment.
Quickly again, what is the website?
Oh, it's ifabtechhub.org.
ifabtechhub.org. Mm-hmm. Nicole Bateman, yep. We appreciate your help today. You've given us some excitement. Thank you very much. And we appreciate all of you watching today. We hope you'll join us again. I'm Stu Ellis.